My name is Nikita, and I'm a project officer at the Cropper Foundation. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. It's part one of three under a project that Cropper Foundation is implementing based on conservation technology for Caribbean CSOs. So for part one, we're glad to have the TTCSN here with us today, and they will be talking to us about visual and acoustic monitoring of cetaceans. Next slide. Next slide. Right, okay. So we have about an hour today to take a deep dive into cetacean monitoring, and we will start with an introduction to the Cetacean Sighting Network team. We have three members here with us today. Again, this project is a CEPF funded project, and the title is Preparatory Grant to Support Integration of Data Science and Technology in Caribbean Conservation Efforts by Civil Society. Pretty long title, hence I just usually refer to it as our CEPF Conservation Technology Project. Yeah, so really I'm going to hand over most of this to the members of TTCSN. But before I do that, let's just talk a little bit about the Cropper Foundation. For those of you all who don't know who we are, we're a civil society organization based in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is actually our 25th year at Cropper. We were founded in the year 2000 by the Cropper family. We work a lot in sustainable development and across different fields such as agriculture, conservation, data for development, and other projects such as arts and literature, etc. So y'all could check us out for those of y'all who don't know about the Cropper Foundation. Yeah. A little bit more about the project itself. I'm not going to read back the title, but the CEPF funded project. It is also being supported by CANARI, which is the Caribbean Natural Resources Institute. I'm actually at the CANARI office today, hosting this webinar. And I'm the project lead. We also have supporting project officers, Soraya Hussein and Alyssa Black. The target countries were, and still are, Jamaica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. And this is one activity within this wider project. Now, to get into the TTCSN team, who have graciously agreed to host this webinar for us as the experts in this field. So we'll start with Sam Nat, and he is the TTCSN bioacoustics specialist. He's worked in marine research and within civil society around the world, Madagascar, Spain, the Las Antilles, and he is a co-founder of the TTCSN as well. We also have Shauna Edgehill, who's the research manager. She is a graduate of the University of the West Indies, and some of her specialty areas and experience include marine research, disaster risk reduction, and different environmental ethics and different climate adaptation projects. We also have Sean Wong with us today, and he's the executive director and treasurer at the TTCSN. He leads financial strategy and organizational development, amongst other things, and he provides leadership helping TTCSN to be a regional authority in marine conservation and stewardship. So again, thank you to the TTCSN team for joining us today, and I will hand it over to you all to lead us for the next few sections. Now, yeah, great. So we are using the webinar feature of Zoom today. So that means that the audience members will not be able to share video or unmute unless invited to do so, but you're welcome to use the chat function, the Q&A, raise your hand, and someone from the panel or tech support will acknowledge you. So whilst presentations are ongoing, if you have any questions, feel free to type them out there, and we will have Q&A segments to address those. So I'm going to hand over to the TTCSN team to take it from here.
Thank you very much, Nikita, and thanks a lot to the Cropper Foundation for inviting us to host this webinar. We're very, very pleased. So I will begin with my presentation. So I'll be talking today about modern research techniques for marine mammals, especially with bioacoustics. What is done, what are the techniques used around the world and in the region, and why they're useful, why they're helpful for conservation and other causes. So a little introduction to myself. I started in linguistics and psychology. I was really interested in languages, communication systems, as well as how humans behave, how the mind works. But I was interested in a lot of things. I had courses in engineering, chemistry, biology, and music technology, so recording. And I just knew that this was what I liked. And then I did a master's, similar master's, cognitive science and language. And then I learned a lot about the evolution of the language faculty in the brain from our ancestors, as well as similar communication systems in other animals, whether they're bees or primates or birds. And that got me really into the biological foundations of language. And I found a master's of bioacoustics. So for my second master's, I did the world's first master of bioacoustics at the University Jean Monnet in France. And that's why there's all these different pictures. We learned how to study the sounds of all of these different animals. And then some of my friends, my peers, researched some of these other animals. But it gave us the foundation to critically analyze and record the communication systems of any animal that makes sound, including humans. But we realized that there is so much still to be learned about the communication systems of other animals. And the more we learn about other animals, the more we realize that they're not that different from us and they deserve our protection. So I decided I wanted to focus on marine mammals, and I did my master's research at the Bottlenose Dolphin Research Institute in Spain. They taught us how to do land-based and boat-based visual surveys, telling apart species from each other, as well as individual identification. And I did my project using acoustic recordings that spanned over years in 2 different locations, in Italy and Spain. So essentially, I looked at what you can call dolphin dialects of the same species, but in 2 different locations. And then after that, I was in Madagascar for 2 months, a small island off of Madagascar called Sainte Marie Island. I assisted a PhD student, Maya Vitana, with his research, and it was really life-changing being up close with these animals every day for 2 months. And we put satellite tags onto the backs of these animals that recorded audio, video, and location data, and it really shed a lot of light on the world of these mother and calf interactions. With humpback whales, the big thing is the male sound, the male song, and so a lot of great work has come out of that project. And also, people see the boat, they see the animals, they see the Instagram reality, but at least half of the time you're just behind a computer. And I learned skills with different programming languages, R, Python, MATLAB, and that's half of the battle there. So the stronger you get in that, the more powerful your findings can become. It's really, really essential to be in a good biologist or somebody in the biology adjacent fields, because you get this data and you need to make meaning of it, as well as these programs, these languages also help you visualize, make really great, effective graphs and whatnot. And so, in case you're still not sure how I went from linguistics and psychology to bioacoustics, well, I had this background as a musician. I play a few different instruments. I speak a few languages, but I've always loved animals, and always tried to I always wanted to know as much as I could about animals and understanding them. And then what I learned outside in Spain and Madagascar and the Lesser Antilles, I thought about how these business models essentially could be applied into Trinidad. I saw in Madagascar this very tiny island, but the research industry also fueled the community because you needed welders, boat drivers, hotels to house researchers, and it was just this great give and take of the people and the research and the conservation that I really wanted to see how best we could try to apply this in Trinidad. And I saw the potential as well when I started the research and identify the very substantial gaps of marine mammal research in Trinidad. I realized that this is what I wanted to do moving forward. And so right now, I'm working on a lot of literature reviews for assessing what is known about the marine mammal populations in Trinidad and the region, and what needs to be known, as well as keeping up to date every day. I read scientific literature from around the globe because this is a very rapidly advancing field, especially with the technology, but also with what is known. And sometimes the knowledge or the ideas that we have can change with one study. So it's crucial to keep on top of that, as well as trying to represent Trinidad. Right now, I'm also the project coordinator for the IUCN's Marine Mammal Protected Area Task Force. They're looking at, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but they're looking at the southern Caribbean coast of South America, as well as the ABC Islands. Fill the data gaps that are needed to establish important mammal areas for these critical populations of animals. Sorry if my internet connection is unstable. I'll try to speak a little slower maybe. And as well as, I've also been working in the offshore oil and gas industry.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. I think maybe if you take your video off, it might help because you seem to be breaking up just a little bit.
Sure, yes, it does say that I'm stable. Let me take off my video then. What was the last thing that you heard clearly?
No, we've been hearing you, but there was a little moment where it broke up. So you're fine to continue.
Sure. Okay, and so these two pictures are from some of my work with the offshore oil and gas industry. I've worked with multiple big name companies. They like their privacy, but doing mitigation and environmental surveys. So, for example, during a seismic survey, if we hear dolphins on our hydrophone, we have to tell the seismic engineers to call a shutdown, and we give them maybe half an hour to wait for the animals to leave the mitigation zone of 500 meters, and then we tell the seismic engineers that they can go ahead. And this is thanks to the EMA, who gave them certificates of environmental clearance that says that they're required to have professionals such as myself there to ensure that they follow environmental regulations. So this is what's referred to as mitigation. So I do visual monitoring and acoustic monitoring for industries. Okay, and been speaking about bioacoustics. I gave an introduction to it, but essentially it's the study of animal communication sounds and their systems. So all languages have a system, a set of rules and formulae that they follow. And sometimes it's not always apparent what the rules are, and that's why they need to be analyzed at different levels. And it's a combination of biology, physics, the study of animal behavior, and a lot of applied engineering because it's a lot of technology. And so like I mentioned, there's this balance between technology and fieldwork. And for the methods, we use microphones, or if it's underwater, we call them hydrophones, as well as recording devices. So these are the devices that, like little computers that store all the data from the microphone. We have automatic detection algorithms. These become more and more popular, more and more effective and advanced because of the advent of AI, as well as many engineers and computer scientists also working behind the scenes on improving software and hardware. And at the end of it, you come out with statistics that show you what all these numbers and signals essentially mean. And why do people study bioacoustics? We can learn more about the behavior of these animals. For example, the interactions between mother humpback whales and their babies. Like, what are they saying to each other? Or males singing and competing for a mate. Also, we learn that some animals have what's called reference. They can make a sound signal that refers to another thing. Essentially, that's what humans do with words that have meaning. And so the more we study, the more we learn about the behavior of these animals. You can also, the same way that you can use an app like Shazam and identify a song, these apps now, these software, you can identify what species. There's popular apps called like Merlin that can identify a bird just by holding up your phone to it from the sound. And some species, you can even identify the individuals once you've recorded enough of their sound. So you can tell, whale A from whale B from whale C, because the same way that humans have distinct voices, many animals have distinct voices or calls. You can get an idea of how many different animals or how many of the same animal are in one location. And these are really important for conservation, for measuring population densities, their whereabouts, and especially when it comes to vulnerable and endangered species. And it's also very important when people look and try to study the evolution. How did human language come about? We look at other complex communication systems. It's very taboo still to call it animal language because they're very different. But why are humans the only ones with language if other animals have very complex communication systems? And so we look at how this came about and look at our relatives in the animal kingdom, whether near or far, to try to piece together the picture. Here's a little idea of the process. So we have sensory technology, different kind of microphones and recording apparatus. We take a survey design. Maybe you have multiple sensors or recorders, or maybe you do the same process every year and see how that changes, see how a population is doing, or in different locations. Then you get the audio, the raw files, the recordings. Then we process the recordings, separate the noise from the meaningful signals, and classify those signals. You can detect the species and also the soundscapes. For example, an underwater soundscape might show a lot of noise from boats or seismic activity, aside from creatures like crustaceans and whales and dolphins and fish. And then you get the statistics. Occupancy, what animals are where and how often are they there? What are the trends? Are they going up and down in abundance? Spatial distributions, different locations. What species are in different locations? What kind of calls are we getting? Are we getting mating calls? Are we getting distress calls? And biodiversity as well. And so passive acoustic monitoring. We already spoke about bioacoustics, and passive acoustic monitoring is essentially a very popular and useful form of bioacoustics. It's important because not just for underwater, but you can study bird diversity, you can study insects, you can study bats. It's really widespread what you can get with PAM, P-A-M. And I'm going to talk a lot about underwater PAM because that's my direct field right now. So you can understand the impact of underwater anthropogenic noise, as well as biodiversity, the distribution, and the occupancy. Where are they and which species? But not all the sounds underwater are from animals. We get sounds from the weather, from thunderstorms, from earthquakes, as well as anthropogenic or man-made sounds like wind farms, seismic survey, and shipping noise. But many species, from crustaceans to fish to mammals, make a lot of sound. And sound is extremely important in the underwater world because light doesn't travel more than 100 meters. And so sound is the main sense of perception for most of the creatures in the ocean. We say that it's safe, it's non-invasive, it's not harmful to the animals, doesn't emit a noise, it just receives noise, and that's how receives sound signals. That's why we say it's passive. It has a minimal risk for humans and animals. It's cutting edge because every year the technology is advancing exponentially. How much data we can process in a given time, or the size and efficiency of these hardware. It's powerful and efficient. Can capture up to several months or sometimes even years, depending on how big your storage is, how big your battery, and the power of your microphone, your hydrophone. It's also very convenient because there are so many vessels and so much anthropogenic activity in the ocean already. You can use PAM on existing vessels, on surveys, on ferries, and shipping, and on rigs. And there are also low-cost solutions that we will speak about very soon. And I mentioned these, so these are the three terms for different kinds of noise in the ocean. There's geophony, that's geological or natural sounds, such as icebergs or earthquakes, thunderstorms. There's biophony, that's the sound of animals or biological beings. Sorry. And anthropony, which is the sounds that come from man. So these are just a few examples that I briefly covered as well. And so here's what a typical PAM setup looks like. The essentials. You have a hydrophone or an automatic recording unit, so that's a hydrophone and a recording device in one. Or you have a hydrophone and a cable, and then it goes to a system like this that has a computer and a signal processing interface and a data processing unit. So you get other data such as the depth and the GPS location. And you need speakers and headphones. It is important to verify what you're listening to is what you think it is, because as great as the software is, it's not 100% perfect yet. And so there are other types of PAM hardware. Many systems use towed hydrophones, where you tow it like on a long cable behind a boat. I mentioned with the humpback whales, we use satellite tags. So you stick them up with suction cups, they come off after a day maximum. It's not harmful to the animal at all. Or they can have hydrophones on buoys, or moored on the ocean floor, or attached to gliders or ROVs, mini submarines that record lots of different kind of data. And you can even have small hydrophones like this that you can use on a consumer level on a small boat like this. And then there are these tiny ones that fish can swallow, and you get information from the fish. So you get from very, very small to very, very big. And here in the oil and gas industry, you'll see some very large, very fancy sets of equipment. And about the software, I mentioned a few things. It's AI enabled. It can extract signals from audio and tell you what they mean. You can do it in real time, so live monitoring, live analysis, or you can take a recording and then analyze it. And then you get great visualizations. Here at the bottom, you can see this looks like a man-made signal, like maybe a seismic explosion. And on the bottom right here, you'll see example of dolphin whistles. And you can see that they're highlighted in blue and that there are many individuals vocalizing at the same time. And it's open source, it's free, it's always being improved, and it's used around the world to study whales and dolphins, and even things like bats and birds, and to mitigate against the potentially harmful effects of human activities in our seas. So let's bring this home. Let's talk about how these incredible technologies are used right here in the Caribbean. So here's an amazing photo from McKay et al. From this year. Well, it's from a study from 2021, where you can see a satellite tag with suction cups attached to a killer whale of the Dominican Republic as it is preying on a humpback whale calf. You see, this one has a tag. So they tagged both of the animals during this interaction, and they got some extremely powerful video footage and behavioral data from, which is the first time that it was shown that killer whales in the Caribbean do prey on humpback whales in the Caribbean. The Dominica Sperm Whale Project is a really advanced pioneering project as well, based in Dominica. And there are various groups, but Dominica's Sperm Whale Project is the one I'll talk about today. So they do long-term acoustic and behavior analysis of sperm whales. Why Dominica is a perfect place for that is because they have basically the only population of sperm whales in the world that do not migrate. In places like the Pacific and the Mediterranean, you won't find the same group, or you won't find sperm whales year-round. They migrate. But here, you have these very highly intelligent, highly vocal species that hang around the Eastern Caribbean all year. And they've identified vocal clans. So they essentially have found that they speak different dialects. Here you can see an example of a call where it's like Morse code. You see 3 long calls, 3 long clicks, and then 2 short. And these 2 on the right, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, even though they're a little different, you can see that each one is spaced differently. So with AI and software, you can analyze these calls and the sounds very, very efficiently. And so they found that sperm whales essentially have a sort of alphabet with their clicks. And aside from acoustic studies, there's also fluke work where you can use visual data. So you get pictures of the fluke, which is the tail fin, and there's AI that helps you visually detect and visually match pictures so you can identify repeat occurrences of sperm whale individuals. And that's how they track and monitor them over time. So if you're interested more about sperm whales or the Dominica Sperm Whale Project, you can find them online, or you can look up Shane Guerrero and his articles, a lot of great work. And there's the Caribbean Wide Orca Project. So this is Jaime Bolaños Jimenez. He's been tracking orca in the Caribbean for the last maybe close to 30 years. So all of these dots are the occurrence of a killer whale in the Caribbean Sea. The gray ones are from the past, the blue ones, sorry, from 1866 to 2012. And the yellow ones are more modern, 1851 to 2023. Sorry, well, new records, not from his last study, sorry. And also, these are assisted from citizen science. People cite killer whales like how they were cited in 2023, and he collects footage and verifies the records of killer whales in the Caribbean Sea. And citizen science is also very popular and powerful new method of gathering scientific data, because everybody's got a smartphone, everybody can find a location on their phone, and it really helps fill the gaps when we don't always have the resources that we need to do meaningful work on marine mammals in the Caribbean. And so as you can see here, many of these dots are right in the Caribbean and in Trinidad. And you can speak, Jaime would love to speak to you about what he knows about orca in the Caribbean and in Trinidad. And our very own Amy Boissel in Trinidad is using PAM to study the manatees, the very critical manatee population in Nariva Swamp. So she's an MPhil candidate at UTT. She's studying the population and it's the population numbers, how they're doing, as well as the habitat, and see what is the extent of their habitat. And she's using these little, very cost-effective, consumer-level, but powerful, very useful, and very durable hydrophone recording systems called hydromoths. And you can see here she's working at a manatee rehabilitation center in Brazil. And here is a hydrophone mooring with a hydromoth. So this is how she will deploy. She will attach it to maybe a rock or a safe place on the bed of the river or the swamp, so that it stays put until the next time she comes back. She might come back after a couple of days or weeks or even maybe a few months, and then she'll analyze the data with PAM and see how many manatees she has detected. So if you'd like to talk to, I see Amy's in the chat. If you have any questions to her, you can address them as well, but you can get in contact with her on LinkedIn or whatever, and I'm sure she'd love to talk to you if you want to talk about manatees in Trinidad. So I'm very excited to see what her findings are. So these are the studies that I spoke about. And this is the picture that I took of a humpback whale calf in Madagascar. And it's my favorite picture that I've taken of marine mammals. So thank you all for your attendance and your time. You can feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions.
All right. Thank you so much. I do actually see some questions in the chat, so I think we'll go ahead and take those now before we move on to the next presenter. Yeah. Um, so I see Shauna did address it, but Johanna asked, you're mentioning open source software. What exactly is the name of the software?
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing these questions now.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
John is correct that this was PalmGuard, but there are others. PalmGuard's not the be all and end all. There's PalmGuard, there's Raven. Um,
Maybe you could drop some names in the chat.
yeah,
Oh,
PalmGuard
yeah,
and
great.
Raven are two of the big ones. But PalmGuard keeps getting better and better. Now it has deep learning capability, and but PalmGuard is the quintessential. For example, for these offshore jobs, we use PalmGuard a lot. It's kind of the standard, and also because you don't need a license, it's open source. And it's always getting better, the capability of what you can do with it.
Great. There's also one from Catherine. What are the challenges that you face in the field during seismic surveys?
But that's an excellent question.
Mhm.
Sometimes the seismic engineers or the navigators are not too versed with the regular. So to be a marine mammal observer or protected species observer, you have to be certified by a body, and it's usually by this English body. So, and they become like the international standard for the regulations. And sometimes these engineers and the navigators don't know, so you kind of have to explain it. There has to be a lot of communication with the other parts involved, and sometimes you can advise that there needs to be a shutdown because of a certain species that was detected. But at the end of the day, we are independent contractors and we are being hired to do just that, to advise. And it's up to them if they don't do the shutdown as is advised by the regulations. And we just put that in our report that they hire us to do because we are impartial and it looks bad on them. So, we can't
Yeah, of
force
course, there's
anybody.
limitations to.
We can't force anybody to do what they're supposed to do. But so at the end of the day, it's up to them. But we are here to serve that purpose, to be impartial, and because it's stipulated by the EMA that they have to listen to us. And so if they don't follow that, it's really on them. And then it looks bad the next time they want to come into a country and do a survey like that or a project. It looks, all those things are considered.
Right.
So yeah, getting communication and getting
Understood.
everybody on board is a challenge.
I would imagine so. Great. Just in the interest of time, there are a few more questions in the chat, but I'm gonna ask that you'll move on to the next presenter, and perhaps
Sure.
in the next set of Q&A, we could maybe address those if we have time. If not, you could start replying in the chat as well, whilst the other people present. Yeah.
Sure, sounds good.
So,
Okay.
but thank you so much. That was very interesting. I like the, on my part, I like the mention of the citizen science because I like that collaborative, that collaboration then between the different stakeholders and how everyday citizens, perhaps just out on a little boat cruise or tour, etc., can potentially participate to this sort of conservation work. So that was very interesting. So thank you
Definitely.
again. I'm going to ask that your next presenter go ahead.
Okay, thanks.
And thanks for everyone for the questions in the chat. You could keep them coming and we'll try to address them in the next Q&A or directly in the chats.
Okay, thanks, Nikita. Thank you, Simon, for that presentation. So let me just share my screen. Nice. Okay, so hi everyone. Let me quickly reintroduce myself. I'm Shauna Edgell, a research manager at TTCSN. I have a bachelor's from the University of West Indies, Cayfield campus in Barbados, and I'm here to talk a little bit about our methodology for acoustic and visual monitoring of cetaceans at TTCSN. So by the end of my presentation, I'm hoping you'd have a decent idea of how we aim to collect data, as well as some of the current and modern tools and systems that are available hopefully some of what I show you can be incorporated into your current or future projects.
Hi, Shauna. Just
Yeah.
to flag that we're not actually seeing your screen as yet. At least I'm not. It says started screen sharing, but I don't actually see it. So maybe reshare. Yeah, I don't think the others are seeing it as well.
Oh no, how is that?
Yeah, we're good now. It's not full screen, but I think we could work with that. And also,
Okay,
if you wanted, you could put your camera on for your presentation. It's completely up to you.
great.
Thank you.
Okay, nice. Perfect. Okay, so you can see my screen now, right? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, so as I mentioned, and this is a quick overview. So I'll briefly touch on TTCSN, our visual and acoustic surveys, and some more interesting aspects of them, as well as some of their shortcomings, before I hand over to Sean to wrap up. So our mission statement at the TTCSN is to employ modern and cutting-edge research technologies to gather data on cetacean ecology for the purpose of understanding and harmonizing our relationship with cetacean wildlife. We aim to do this in two main ways, which is passive acoustic monitoring, which Siam just covered, and what we refer to as BBVS, boat-based visual surveys. So BBVS, as we call it, is a vessel-based standardized line transect sampling method. So we travel along pre-planned transect lines represented by the image in the upper corner here, by the green lines, just offshore. And then team members working on a rotational basis keep an eye out for any cetacean sightings. So you can see here from one of our outings. And once a pod or an individual is spotted, photographers on board aim to capture images of the cetaceans that can help us identify both species as well as the individual animal. So photo ID then works as a form of mark, release, recapture sampling. And this can tell us about population size, movement patterns, survival and recruitment rates, and population growth. This type of visual survey is not new by any means. It's been an integral part of cetacean monitoring for a while now, very long time now, but manually identifying each individual cetacean via pictures can be a very laborious task, occupies a lot of researchers' time and manpower. And as I mentioned, researchers have been working towards making quicker and just as, if not more accurate results via deep learning models. So in recent years, researchers have been developing and employing deep learning models to automate the photo identification of cetacean species and individual cetaceans themselves. For example, these images are from Flipbook, which I think Siam may have mentioned. Where they've built and trained algorithms to identify individual cetaceans based on unique characteristics, such as in image A, the coloration of the fluke-tail and humpback whales, in image B, the notches in the fluke-tail of sperm whales, and in image C, the notches in the dorsal fin of bottlenose dolphins. So these are all features that researchers would have used themselves to identify individuals. But now, instead of hours spent scouring through images to find and compare potential matches, deep learning models allow the same volume of work to be done in a fraction of the time. Flipbook currently identifies individuals across 8 different species, including the three already named, as well as spotted dolphins, right whales, and orcas, and a few others. And the best part is that the models are going to just get increasingly better and more efficient the more that we use them. So Finprint, in this first article here, is trained to specifically identify individuals from the Biggs killer whale population along the Pacific coast of North America, with an accuracy of over 94%, which is great, but it's still not a silver bullet. Most models, so some of the shortcomings of these deep learning models is that they still require some human intervention before they can be fed into the photo ID model. For example, the model mentioned in this article here can identify if the cetacean is present in a photograph, but often has difficulty sorting out images that are too blurry or indistinct or too indistinct for matching. Additionally, the developers have found that species that use coloration as a secondary identifying characteristic may underperform, and this could be due, they theorize, it could be due to the difficulty in environmental conditions when the image is taken. So things like glare or splash or water spray may impact the model's ability to accurately identify the individual based on coloration. So while the use of deep learning models has some shortcomings, it has still contributed significantly to reducing the human workload in individual and species ID of cetaceans through photo ID. And as people and researchers continue to share images and data, collaborate and tinker with the models over time, they will only get increasingly more accurate, which is really exciting. So I'll do a brief, Simon did a really good job covering PAM, so I'll just do a brief overview. So yes, as I mentioned, PAM, or passive acoustic monitoring, employs the use of hydrophones to listen to the soundscape of a given area. We at TTCSN are particularly interested in cetacean vocalizations, but PAM can be used to capture a variety of underwater sounds, such as commercial activities, ambient noise levels, and high traffic areas, as well as any other organism that makes distinct sounds during territory defense or courtship. I think shrimp is a pretty popular one. And there's several combinations of hydrophone setups that researchers can employ, such as continuous recording or event-triggered recording, where recordings are only taken if a sound event triggers the recording, as well as stationary or mobile deployments. So this is the setup that we at TTCSN have settled on for now. It's an autonomous, continually recording mod hydrophone. In the pilot phase of our project, we aim to have 2 hydrophones deployed around Trinidad, but with the expectation of expanding the number of hydrophones, expanding both the number of hydrophones and expanding the hydrophones into both Trinidad and Tobago in the years to come. So this model of hydrophone is the Dory L, which allows up to 6.9 months of continuous recording. This requires us to not only deploy the hydrophone, but conduct periodic checks and retrieve the hydrophone at the end of the 6 months to switch out batteries, collect and process the audio files before being deployed again. Once the audio files are collected, we can run them through PAMGuard, which Simon mentioned previously, to clean, organize, and segment the audio data, as well as to process the data for detection, classification, and localization. So some of the capabilities of PAMGuard, which is an open source software, is that it allows for both real-time monitoring as well as retroactive analysis. It can identify sound events of interest based on the audio files you put into it, and it can determine source direction and distance of the sound from the hydrophone. It can also has the capability of classification of cetacean species based on the clicks, whistles, and other vocalizations that it picks up. So very, very exciting. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the outcomes we hope to achieve. So the combined approach of both visual as well as acoustic monitoring surveys give us at TTCSN a unique opportunity to gather a large and very rich data set. So some of the goals we hope to achieve through our research is to identify and quantify migratory species in Trinidad and Tobago's waters, identify and quantify resident individuals in our national waters, as well as give us a better idea about the population dynamics, recruitment, and survival of the species of cetaceans that occupy our national waters. Another item that we're really keen on investigating is ambient underwater noise and how this may impact negatively the cetaceans that use our waters throughout the year, as well as collaboration. So I think our BBVS outings and our continuous acoustic recordings offer important avenues for collaborations with other NGOs locally or regionally and other individuals to collect data on things like seabirds when we go out to do our visual surveys. So I hope I've been able to touch on all the topics of interest. If I would love to have a conversation with anyone if they're interested afterwards. And yeah, I'd like to hand over to Sean now, and then we can do some Q&A after.
Thank you so much, Shauna. Handing over to Sean, who is muted.
Hi guys. Okay, so how do I do this? Okay, perfect. You guys, is it working?
Yeah, it just came up.
Sweet. Alrighty, so I'm just gonna briefly run over. I'm just gonna take a few minutes because I know we have to close at 2, but I want to talk about a very important component that attaches itself to everything that we do in the background, and that is data management. So essentially, I'm not going to go into a deep dive anymore because of time, but if we want our research community to thrive, we really need to think about long-term data management solutions. And across the world, research teams are collecting more and more data. Palm collects terabytes of data, so terabytes of audio, and then we have visual data, which is really large and a whole bunch of feeds and observations that we're going to be making. And whether it's marine biology, climate observations, climate science, public health, the challenge is the same on how do we store it and protect it and make it accessible to people who need it the most. And without the right infrastructure, valuable insights get lost, collaboration becomes difficult, and progress slows down. So what TTCSN aims to, one moment, to employ is an infrastructure called Nutanix, right? So we go over hundreds of terabytes of acoustic and visual data through PalmGuard and for the acoustic data, for example. And as I said, we need it to be secure, accessible, and scalable. And we need a system that would be able to branch out not just to Trinidad and Tobago, but to all stakeholders. So what we're managing, raw wave files, visual data, processed data, and we really want to open the access. Scalable storage for compute and raw processed data. What is that really? So Nutanix is really a server, but it's a very powerful one. So you know how more or less sometimes to access your data, if anyone has a local server in any one of the organizations you work in, there's this room, there's some fans on it, there's a loud beeping sound if the battery for the UPS is gone, and we access the data is slow, and you can't really make it open source, make it available to the public unless you subscribe to maybe Microsoft Azure or AWS, Amazon's infrastructure. But at the same time, you're held hostage because it's not local. If anything happens, you may lose data, you may lose access, and you just don't have that much control. So in order to have scalable storage and compute for raw processed data, have it being very quickly accessible and recoverable, and to have it encrypted for security, and to have it integrated into other websites, university websites, other NGO websites. We we want to employ a really robust, strong domestic server using the Nutanix infrastructure, which allows all of this to happen. For more technical information, we could talk afterwards on how it works, but I'm just going to skim through in the essence of time because I know we're running out of time, right? But what's really important here to note is that the last point here, cloud-based access for global research, that's a really huge one. TTCSN is not looking at just having our data in-house and being shared manually by people coming to us and saying, hey, we want to find out your data. No, what we're interested in is having hundreds, thousands of terabytes of data available to anyone on platforms that we just integrate with. So everything is automated and everything moves extremely quickly. And we believe that that is really the future of how data should be treated um, in our entire conservation and research space, right? So it's, as I said, secure, scalable, integrates with a bunch of different languages, uh, and it's a very accessible repository. This was our process, a bit too complicated, but essentially we're building a smarter ocean network. Um, we, I no other organization really employs this level of infrastructure because it's super expensive. To be honest, it's about close to 1 million TT. But I do think it's necessary, and I do think it can really take us forward and integrate our government institutions, our regional stakeholders, and even global regulatory institutions. And they are actually what gave us the inspiration for being so guarded and so establishing such a strong data management component. It was really the international structures and how they manage compliance and much in first world nations and stuff like that. And I think we should take that approach for posterity and just moving forward in becoming compliant and strong. If Trinidad and Tobago can establish it, we can just make the entire region become as robust as it could in communicating and managing data. And that's it for me. Thank you so much, guys, and thanks to all the presenters, and thank you so much, Crapper. Any questions? I'll jump in the chat, or I'll answer right now.
Oh, thank you, Sean. So we do have quite a few questions in the chat, and we have like about 5 minutes, I would say. So let's see if we could tackle some of them, perhaps that may not have been addressed. So I'm going to go back a little bit. Sean, you can actually leave this part of your screen up in case anyone who has not had their questions answered or just wants to contact you all further, they could get this information here. So, I'm afraid to say the name, to pronounce the name incorrectly, but Jalaluddin Khan, I think, has a question. Does Trinidad and Tobago have a marine mammal policy, laws, regulations, and do you know any of the key ones?
So
Anyone from your side could take it.
Yeah,
Take the question.
I'm trying to find the exact law in the act right now, but Michelle has 1 minute. She's saying, no, we don't have exact laws for the marine mammal policies, but I thought that there was something in an act trying to find. I'll try to
So Michelle did provide some clarity, but it didn't go to everyone. It just went to the host and panelists. But she did say that the manatees in particular are considered a ESS, environmental sensitive species, but she doesn't know of any other specific legislation that speaks to protection of marine mammals in our local context.
Yeah.
So
I want to just jump in there just to
sure,
state that
go ahead.
we pretty much founded this organization on the realization that there was really nothing on cetacean legislation. There's not enough research. We don't know what's in the waters, and Palm and all of our efforts, our entire organization is structured towards filling that research gap so that we can inform these laws. In 2023, we were given the fisheries bill to look over. There was nothing really in it. I know the EMA has the ESS designation, and that's the only thing that's local. But internationally, the IUCN has designations such as the IMMA, Important Marine Mammal, uh, area status, which technically states that this region does not have enough research done, we do not have anything uncovered on migratory or resident populations. So to answer your question, no. Trinidad and Tobago, it's a huge gap. We have way more sharks, way more reef, way more turtle legislation, but cetacean is very much the bottom of the list.
Right. We also have some comments that point to the Conservation of Wildlife Act, Chapter 6701, which, considers all mammals as protected, though there seems to be, well, besides the vermin and the game species, but there seems to be some discussion in the chat about, well, what exactly that covers. In addition to, I think my input here would be that this, even if we did have the laws, policies, regulations, etc., the enforcement really is the important factor to consider here. And do we have the capabilities and capacity to enforce these protections for certain species, as well as protected areas, marine protected areas, etc. So I'm gonna see if I can take one more question whilst you all continue in the chat.
I would like, there's this one I
Yeah, go
would
ahead.
like to take about the effect of seismic survey.
Yep.
Also from Jalaluddin.
Yeah. So,
Trying to find it. Oh, okay. It was basically about the effect of seismic surveys and other. Oh yeah. Currently, if a commercial marine activity, example, seismic oil exploration, drilling, marine engineering, etc., impact negatively marine mammals, what laws, penalties, who and how is protection enforced? Well, one, the correlation between the cause and effect has not been shown. They have strandings and there's seismic activity. But has anyone shown that the strandings happen at the same time as the seismic activity? Not to my knowledge. And you need to do necropsies. You need to make sure, you need to rule out other things, because what if this animal was sick? Which has been shown, some of these animals are sick when they strand. So all factors need to be taken into consideration to show a correlation. And in the second part of that question about the repercussions, the penalties, the laws, there, as Michelle was hinting, there are no direct repercussions or laws to be faced for this sort of activity. In the oil and gas industry, following the JNCC guidelines is just a global standard, but there's nothing besides, for the EMA suggesting that they have species observers such as myself there for these projects, but that's really up to them. It's not, doesn't go back to the law. That's just their guideline. So there are no real repercussions,
Yeah. Catherine, we just have templates and just copy and pasted stuff from other, legislations and guidelines. But if we want to put something meaningful into our legislation and into our CECs, we need to do research because we just do not know what is out there. And we don't need to just do research on the continental shelf, but we also need to go into deep water, which is going to take about 10 years. We're going to take about 5 years to do the continental shelf. And then we're going to need buoys and more expensive equipment and more investment to go out into the deep waters, right? So that's what other countries do in order for them to have really specific designation and knowledge of their cetacean population. And it's not just cetaceans you're going to get from Palm, you're going to get everything, right? Well, it's a huge frequency range, but yeah, it really mobilizing this in a country that doesn't prioritize it is a challenge.
Thank you, Sean and Sam, for contributions. I have to be mindful of time. We are a bit after 2 p.m. and I know everyone's time is super valuable. but there's a lot of discussion in the chat. So what I would suggest is that those who are interested, that they contact the TTCSN directly and, further whatever collaborations and conversations that you would like to have. Because again, I would love to discuss this all evening, but I don't think we have the liberty to do so. So yeah, I do see the questions, and I will advise you all to follow up directly with the TTCSN on those. That being said, one final little wrap up from me. As the representative from the Cropper Foundation, I think it's very important that conservation-based groups around the region, because we did open this webinar up to any interested individuals or organizations throughout the region, consider what those that have marine interest in their mandates, consider how they could potentially incorporate some of this work or just be part of advocacy, sharing the message, on whatever different countries you all come from. Unfortunately, I did forget to mention earlier, one of our target countries for this particular wider project is Jamaica, and we all know that they are experiencing the hurricane right now. So I know a few of them who would have been registered to attend would most likely not have been able to, and we hope that they're all staying safe over there. So I think, as a region, conservation-based organizations definitely need to come out of the silos, work more closely with each other. And I hope that this webinar and the connections made here will be a catalyst for some of that to happen. So on behalf of the Cropper Foundation, I'm very pleased to have facilitated this. I thank you all immensely. You all definitely, I think, enlightened a lot of us into what's behind the scenes, because obviously we know this is just a little beginner's taste you all gave us here. There must be much more to it. But yeah, I would definitely like to thank you all. And again, I hope that whatever connections are made here live on beyond this webinar and continue to contribute to the conservation of cetaceans regionally and globally. Yeah, so with that being said, thank you so much, everyone. I will now close the webinar, and I hope to see some of you all in our part 2, which will be delivered by the Cocoa Research Center. So you all could look out on Cropper's social media for the registration for that one. But again, thank you so much, TTCSN team, and to all the attendees and participants.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you,
great day,
Nikita.
everyone.
Thank you, Cropper.
Thank you all.
All
Take care.
right, everyone. Bye. Take care.
Bye.